Hi, welcome to Project Geospatial, everybody. I'm Adam Simmons, and here with another session of the Sensor Showdown. We have border tensions using COMSAR, or Commercial SAR Imagery. Greg, I want you to take it away and tell us what you have for today.
Thanks, Adam. My name is Greg Scottsko. I'm a senior product manager over at Ursa Space for change detection. So for those of you who are not familiar with Ursa Space Systems, we're a US-based satellite intelligence company. We provide on-demand analytic solutions to both business and government decision makers. And our mission is to reveal global change from space. And so we use our expertise in radar satellite imagery, acquisition and analysis to provide those results and that information for folks. We just a little bit more about us. We maintain one of the largest networks of commercial SAR satellites, and that enables us to provide rapid tasking for regular updates. And we've really taken the pain out of collecting and processing data from those multitude of commercial satellite sources, and then also performing those advanced analytics. You're going to see examples of that later on today as we cover some of our capabilities for non-coherent change detection. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with SAR, SAR is known as synthetic aperture radar. It's a form of radar imaging, kind of works like echolocation, where satellites up in space are transmitting RF signals back and forth at high velocity, and the changes perceived in those signals are what we use to form imagery and to also perform analytics. We can do things like measure speed, distance, direction of something moving, the presence of items, objects, things in a scene, and that's actually what we're going to focus on today is presence of objects. Today, we're going to talk about change detection monitoring. It's a service that Ursa provides to our customers, both the government and civil and commercial. We do this. We're going to cover change detection, change monitoring in general with non-coherent change detection. We're going to look at a case study of India and China, and then we're also going to look at Beirut, which recently, unfortunately, had a large disaster, an explosion occur, and some work we've been doing there. So for background, for those of you who aren't familiar, non-coherent change detection, it's a form of change detection where we are detecting objects either being new or having left an area using same imagery that is in the same location but separated by time. And so that non-coherent change detection, or NCD, provides users to have a quick way to compare imagery at the pixel level and determine the level of additive or subtractive change that is occurring in an area. In this case, we're looking at some strip map imagery of the Caribbean. And what you see here is what a lot of people know as the red fled, blue new kind of infographic that a lot of folks who are familiar with SAR are familiar with as well, especially in the government side. Red indicating things that have objects that have left the scene, so they were in the original image but not in the second image we looked at over time, and blue being new. Those are objects that have arrived or appeared in the second image that were not in the original image. In this case, it brings out highlights and ports. There's ships that can leave. You can measure floating lit oil tank volumes. You can detect construction changes, destruction, deforestation, any kind of change like that that's observable is what we do with non-coherent change detection. So in this case, we focused on the China and India border tensions that's really flared up around late May, early June, where there's the area called the Galwan Valley, a very highly contested area for decades between the two countries. In May and June, tensions flared because as a Indian patrol neared a border checkpoint, ending up in a scuffle or a skirmish where injuries and casualties were sustained, and those skirmishes increased over the next few days and increased tensions between the two nations and within the region as everybody's watching. So instead of focusing on the exact location of the tension where there's some construction going on both sides, quick, rapid changes, we focused on support locations, places that could provide meaningful support to this tension point, air bases, naval, anything like that where you would have supporting quick reaction forces that could help out if something were to happen. So with with that in mind, we collected periodic SAR imagery to monitor if there was infrastructure changes such as airbase expansions, or say vehicles have been amassing in one location, or they're suddenly not amassing in one location, meaning there might be a drawdown or a steady state. And so we're using non-coherent change detection to determine if that change is happening, if new things are coming into the scene or the area, or if if things have left the area, and give a better situational awareness to decision makers, and also provide another form of ground truthing against, say, posturing by the different nations, saying, if they're saying they're pulling back, but they're not really. So we're providing that kind of oversight and information from people. And then if necessary or if possible, we also like to use our non-coherent change detection and some of our other analytics to tip and cue higher resolution, both synthetic aperture radar satellites as well as optical satellites from our partners such as Black Sky. As I mentioned already, the tensions flared in May and June, but here's where we start our story with respect to this border tension. So this is a Chinese airbase in Chinese-controlled Tibet called Beirut. It's a fairly remote airstrip, quite large runway, at least in length, to support a variety of different sizes. It's a dual-use airport, some commercial, definitely some military. And it's in reasonable proximity to the detention area to provide support. And so we wanted to investigate whether or not any change has been occurring, if there's been any plussing up of forces. So we start off with some open source imagery. This imagery is quite old, not quite old, but several years old. So it provides a nice baseline for current investigations. So starting March 31st of 2020, month prior to any kind of skirmishes, we were able to acquire some Sentinel, European Space Agency Sentinel-1 imagery of the location. And it's, if you look at the SAR image here, you see the bright returns for strong reflectors and signal to give us an idea of what is on the ground. And if you go back up to the commercial open source optical imagery, it's a very similar footprint. There's not anything really going on. So it serves as a great baseline before any kind of a skirmish occurred. But then if we go to July 5th, we've got a great deal of change going on. There's all these bright spots are indicative of new objects or objects that are a strong reflector of an RF signal. So whereas before we had very little, especially in this northeast corner of the airfield, suddenly we've got a lot more going on in the northeast. And then so we're able to confidently identify new buildings being built, possible new construction equipment or aircraft support equipment on the runway itself. And this is where the detected change comes in. This is where we have run our non-coherent change detection on this airfield. And so we've highlighted here some of the changes that have happened between March and July in this image. And so what you see here is to the northeast, we have new support buildings. These are represented by the blue shapes, indicating that they were added in the space of just a couple of months. We've got new vehicles, possible aircraft or support vehicles on the tarmac. And then in the bottom left, or southwest corner of the image, you have a lot of new disturbance of earth. So it's either they're piling dirt there from construction or possibly even disturbing earth to create fill to build out that airfield. And this is where I was talking to tipping and queuing our partner networks for high resolution optical. We were able to get imagery through our Black Sky, our partners at Black Sky, to verify the changes we were seeing on the ground. And up here on the northeast, you can definitely see there's been a lot of construction. There's new concrete pads, there's new buildings. We've got transport aircraft sitting in the parking area, possibly some other small airplanes. They've also built and enhanced the border, the perimeter of the airbase itself. So using that, we're able to verify, validate what we're seeing as well. And we're also able to easily share that change, either through GeoTIFFs, GeoJSON, API, so that way we can quickly get results up into platforms that are meaningful and useful to people. In this case, we've taken the same non-coherent change detection results for this airfield and uploaded them onto ArcGIS Online. So now this is actually a live sharing of that data, something we can update routinely and and show change over time, different timestamps, and just kind of show a great progression and trend. And to that exact point, we continue to monitor the change here in Gari Kunsa. This is again that first change analytic I showed you, where you've got the blue from new things since between March and July, but then on August, just last week, we got new imagery, and there's been a whole lot more activity and change in that area. Construction appears to be ongoing. There's all these blue dots are indicative of progress on that construction, maybe new structures being finalized, finished, and erected, roofs going on them, something that changes the radar signature. And you've still got a lot of earth disturbance down here, either putting it in, moving it around, removing it. And some of the structures, there's been some movement of materials or objects down here. And there's, in previous optical image, we were able to see that there was construction going on in the bottom, the southeast part of the airfield. And here we still have activity going on and vehicles or buildings being constructed down in the southeast. So as you can tell, the trend is still increased activity at this airbase on the Chinese side of the Galwan Valley area. And to be even, we also looked at the Indian side to see how the response has been. So we looked at several different Indian air bases, decided to focus on the Chandigarh Air Base, which is in the northern plains area of India. It's able to provide relatively quick support, air support to the Galwan Valley. It's also a larger airfield. Again, a dual-use airfield like you would see here in the United States, where you might have National Guard, Air National Guard planes on one side of the tarmac and then commercial and private planes on the other. Once again, we've pulled in the open source validation imagery to give us a baseline before we start looking at the SAR, just to give us something of a reference point. And here on May 8th, we got our first image. This is right around the time of the skirmish, just beforehand, or beginning of the new skirmishes, and the tensions increasing. And the pre-skirmish activity level, the north side of the airfield is the military side. There are some detections, some returns on the air from the parking ramps, but not a whole lot of radar return activity. So this is kind of a baseline of activity for us in this instance. And then we revisited on July 3rd, very similar to the Gari Kunsa Air Base. We wanted to see what's going on. So this is post a bunch of escalation and tensions and posturing, and we've seen a lot increase in detections or returns on this parking ramp. So all these bright spots on the ramp, those represent things like transport aircraft, helicopters, smaller jets. And this increase, we believe, is likely in direct response to an emergency request by the Indian government to redeploy air forces to support the Galwan Valley tension area and to just provide meaningful response times and support should something happen. And so once again, we've observed the changes. We've detected the increase of the presence of these aircraft, especially on the parking ramps. And it's important to note that these blue shapes, in this case, those are new aircraft more than likely on the ramp. There's not a whole lot of red next to them or around them, so that indicates new arrivals as opposed to just the movement of a plane from parking spot A to parking spot B. So here we can fairly confidently say, India has been responding to the perceived threat. They've increased their presence and their activity at their airfields. Once again, we're able to display that easily and make it accessible for users via our GIS line and online and common formats that would make that data very accessible. And so we updated this as well using imagery from last week. Here's the activity from July 5th, the changes we observed on July 5th or July 3rd, beginning of July. Here's all those new parking ramp detections of those aircraft. And then on our revisit in August, a lot of that's changed. A lot of red is present, indicating that those planes have either, majority of those planes have left, repositioned. So it kind of seems like it tends to indicate that the airbase activity is on a decrease, but there's still a presence of material support. And so we continue to monitor. This is something we're building out. It's a system we're developing for routine monitoring to provide idea on intensity of change, how things are changing, give context and meaning to that change. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Justina Kozianka. She's our platform analytics lead. She helps me massively with developing a lot of these workflows, these analytics. So take it away, Justina.
Thanks, Greg. So what I'm going to demo really quickly is the interface that we use to actually generate these maps. So as mentioned before by Adam, we're looking at a site in Beirut. The blast site occurred about a month ago. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of how the magic's made. So choosing a predefined geospatial feature, you can see here that we have a lot of sites that we monitor. We pull that up. That's just the AOI that we're interested here. We choose regional change monitoring. So for us, that means a pairwise comparison where we choose two dates and compare one against the other. Greg can go into that a little bit more, but the other option, broad area change, is where we generate a time series. But for the purpose of this demo, we'll stay here. I will demo a comparison between August 17th. Here we can specify the time. So with our virtual constellation, we will be able to, in the future, be able to do within day comparisons where we compare morning versus afternoon. In theory, we can compare within an hour even to detect change. And we can compare against August 22nd, let's say at 3:11 a.m. So the way our algorithm works right now is that we will search our archive of imagery to find the imagery that's closest to this date. So we may not have an image specifically at 3:11 a.m., but we'll find the image that will work for the change detection analytic that is closest. Here we have some additional parameters. We have min detection size. So this is a scaling factor along pixels. Each pixel of the image that we choose, here we're using sentinel imagery, meaning that we're along a 10 meter per pixel resolution. So for our sake, we will choose 3 pixels to be the minimum section size. This means a window of 3 by 3. So that is a 30 meter by 30 meter ground resolution size sensitivity. This is a threshold. So this is a tuning parameter that allows us to determine how much change we want to see. This is a little bit subjective. We do have some recommended values here that we go over. But for our cases, I'm going to choose 2.5, and I will name it Beirut Blast 805 versus 0822. Our purposes. I'll submit this analytic, but here we have some images that I've already generated. We have one here that we can pull up, view the results. So we see here a comparison between August 5th and August 10th. We see areas of change, the blue meaning there is a detection in the second image and not the first. So we have a little bit of speckle here. From this, we can download the results as well. So if we choose to download results, we get a pop-up here with our original job name, and we're able to download a GeoTIFF and a GeoJSON that can then be used for advanced processing. All right. So that's a little bit of how we work on our side. Our analytic is still running, but should be completed very shortly. Greg, do you want to take it back?
It's actually really great to see that, Justina, because it's great and important to note that we've really spent a lot of time and effort in creating almost basically push-button analytics for things like non-coherent change, something that's historically been very challenging to accomplish. So that is just a view of our internal platform that enables that workflow, but it's also something that enables us to serve it out to customers easily as well. And that workflow that you saw running there is largely what helps us power the results we give to our clients and our customers. All right, so now that we've talked about that and seen some of the initial non-coherent change detection from the Beirut area, we're going to look at a time series analysis on Beirut. Starting, everybody or most people are probably familiar with the fact there was a large explosion there back on August 5th. Huge blast. It leveled many buildings in the immediate vicinity. It basically sank some ships, pushed the ship out of the water. I mean, it's just dramatic and tons of damage to the surrounding areas. So here on the screen is a time series story map that we've created about the Beirut blast. Right now, I just want to give you a little bit of context to the area. The red you see, actually, we'll start with the blue, step back a second. The blue is, mixed residential, commercial. You can see how close proximity it is to the port area. Pretty typical for a lot of larger cities that have developed around their ports. Now, in the red, you see there are the warehouses that are around the port, different kinds of structures. The grain silo in yellow right here is probably the most important part. That is where the explosion occurred in Beirut. But then there's the rest of the port too, where you've got an active container port, just a general cargo port in purple, and then in green you've also got oil and energy-based activities that are also associated with the port. So on the day of the blast, on August 5th, that blast, some experts are estimating it was at least the equivalent of 100 tons of TNT, if not more kilotons, and it leveled things for quite some place. So here, our non-coherent change detection analytic, we ran it using imagery from July, but also actually imagery from Sentinel from the European Space Agency that was collected just minutes after the blast happened. About 20 minutes after the blast. So very fresh data that we used when we created this non-coherent change detection result. So once again, we've got the red fled, blue new, red being things that were in the first image that are no longer there in the second image or have been affected in some way. In this case, we've got a large amount of red. This is the blast center where the explosion occurred. It leveled warehouses where all the red is. It caused damage all the way across the mooring areas in the city center, including over here. So a large part of the port and the warehouses were affected. Even across the water to the northwest, there was some damage to new construction, new warehouses. There's an expansion going on over there. And, we accomplished this again by looking at comparing the actual individual pixel intensities of the two separate images of the area. And then we subsequently tasked our partners at Black Sky to get high resolution optical imagery of the blast site as well, or of Beirut in general, that is, centered around the blast site. And this is taken same day in the evening, I believe, as the explosion. And you can see things have changed dramatically. There's a ship turned over. There's a giant crater where the explosion occurred. There's just smoke and rubble everywhere. And so what we're doing here is we're visually verifying the extent of the damage that we're observing and detecting. And then we took that imagery again with using pan-sharpened imagery from Black Sky. We overlaid our non-coherent change detection results to visually validate what we were seeing and what we were detecting with respect to the immediate area where all the damage occurred. We were even able to detect obviously the large crater that was left behind by the blast, the destruction of the grain silo, the flattening of all these warehouses. And in some cases in this area here, the roofs were just blown off, so rendering those buildings useless as well. We were even able to acquire the RF signature in return of the change of the status of this boat, this vessel. That was I believe it's a small cruise liner that was parked, empty, but it overturned, and a lot of damage to the opposite side again of the port. So on the next revisit, between the 5th of August and the 10th of August, we were able to collect another image on the 10th and compare that to the 5th to see what further changes have occurred at the port. There's new activity indicated in the port area. It's starting to show, for lack of a better word, life. It's showing uptick, or at least things are moving in this area. It's indicating the main flow of the port has not been impacted. And in the vicinity of the blast location, in the SAR imagery, we're able to detect yet another ship had rolled over in the time period, in between the first image, or the August 5th image, and the August 10th image, which is the ship to the left here. That was in this image, this image from before the blast. There's a ship there that rolled over as well. And as we continue to iterate this monitoring over time, we're able to see new arrivals of ships. In this case, we're now looking at the port on the 17th of August. We've got new arrivals represented by the blue. These are all size of ships. There's new ships along the general cargo port. There's new ships in the container area as well. And to the east, there's just the ports coming back to life, it appears. And then the current day, we were able to get imagery 2 days ago to continue our monitoring of the area. There's not as much change near the blast site, near the destruction. However, the port activity seems to be increasing and resuming something of a cadence. So we're able to layer in data from our partners over at Spire, their it's vessel tracking data, AIS. We're able to lay that over top of our NCD non-coherent change detection analytics and verify what we're seeing. The arrival of these new ships, represented by the yellow dots. These are all ships that have transponders on them. And we're able to just see that the port is resuming activity. So in the meantime, while we're still monitoring the blast area or the disaster area, so we can see what's changed, see when they start to commence recovery, clean up, rebuild, we're also able to see that economic indicators are still working and there's still traffic coming in and out of the area to help support the economy of Beirut, of Lebanon. And this is something we're going to continue to monitor. We're going to build this into a dashboard. We have a capabilities dashboard, so if you want to check out anything else that URSA is capable of doing, from our activity indices to change monitoring to oil measurements, one of our initial first most mature products are oil measurements. It's all available for you to view over at ursaspace.com.
So I appreciate the presentation. That's awesome. Learning more about how you monitor border tensions, especially with the airfield, that was pretty impressive. So a couple questions coming in here. One of them is related to how do you gauge what areas to monitor? Is this by customer demand, or do you have a set of predetermined border areas that you constantly monitor, try and figure out the tensions between certain countries?
Currently, it's more customer demand. What's going on in the world where people want us to look and want us to monitor. We are building out capabilities in the near term, actually, to do broad area change monitoring, where we can cover a swath of a whole country or even larger than a couple of SAR image footprints and be able to provide indications of change over time for those areas. So that would include borders. And then you would be able to tip and queue to higher resolutions through our platform or through optical and be able to really hone in on anywhere you see a strong change going on.
Yep. And I'd like to add that for areas like Beirut, this Beirut blast incidents, for example, we're able to register an AOI that we can look at again and again to do a continuous monitoring. And that's how Greg was able to build his presentation.
So some of this also not just customer driven, but also event driven. So if something happens in that area, you'll know just to maintain monitoring of that border or specific location for as long as things are active.
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. So another aspect to this is the relationship you have between SAR and electro-optical. I think a lot of folks sometimes are under the assumption that you can just interpret SAR as is, and you get a SAR image in, and you have to just and maybe analysts or folks who look at this stuff like us, we automatically know what's on it. But you need a lot of reference imagery to kind of gauge or have some type of foundation to interpret what's going on there, some type of baseline. Can you talk a little bit more about that best practice?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, a lot of people assume just if you see SAR all the time, you know what the heck you're seeing. But it's hard to give context of what you're seeing unless you have some other references, such as electro-optical or multispectral, things like that. So it's important to, best practices to baseline what we're looking at, either through electro-optical, like you saw in the airbase example, or just using historical SAR imagery to baseline and trend activity that you're seeing in that area is a large component of being able to produce meaningful analysis and do more than just say, just change here. It's more important to be able to say things about there's change occurring here, you might want to look, or it's a lot of positive change, a lot of negative change. That kind of context is really what the important aspect and result from this work is.
I think the Beirut example was interesting because what I want to know the tie-in between this topic that you all are focused on. I mean, I know the topic's border tensions, but what's the overall impact of the type of analysis that you do on the economic indicators that we've seen in previous sessions? With some of your colleagues have given in on the Sensor Showdown.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, that's something that we're working on, tying in non-coherent change detection with things like the activity indicators or the economic indicators. If you're looking at an oil refinery and you're monitoring output and storage, but suddenly you've got a change detection that indicates there's been damage, something like what happened in Saudi a year or two ago, it's kind of where we start to fuse these things together to help improve the product.
So I guess this question's for. I guess I'm briefing me. I guess it's for Justine. So you get a small walkthrough through the application on the screen. So can you talk a little bit more about how much functionality is to just draw a box and monitor an area based off maybe some of the automated detects, or how much does this work behind the scenes is more manual on Ursa's part?
No, well, what you saw just there, me drawing a box, putting in the dates, that's what I did to generate the other maps as well. Yep. It's just that I had them, a little bit preset, just so things would go smoothly. But there's been a lot of work behind the scenes to get that built, obviously, as a cohesive app that kind of hides details of what we do. But it's all pretty automated and streamlined at this point, and we're only working to make it better right now.
And you mentioned outputs into things like ArcGIS, Greg, and a few other locations. Can you talk about the different outputs that that can come out of the application that Justine was showing?
Sure. Yeah, we were able to output it, as a raster GeoTIFF for easy ingest into localized software if you want to use it to do some more further analysis with other layers, other fusion opportunities. We're also able to export it as a vector product, GeoJSON, or even you can do it as a CSV if you wanted to, depending on what your end use is going to be, and then push that into ArcGIS Online or some enterprise solution where you can then start building out monitoring dashboards and bring in other analysis you have going on. So it's kind of a big push right now is to make sure that it's not just push button analytics, very simple in that regard, but also easier to access, easier to work with.
Yep, and right now, most of what we showed today was primarily just a qualitative overview of the change, but something that we're actively working on right now is adding additional quantitative layers that take that, do some of the analysis for you to be able to localize areas of change, give you lat longs. We already kind of do that with our GeoJSONs and our polygons. We're doing rates of change, we're doing percentage of disturbance, things like that, so that when you do get these results, you also get a portfolio of additional work that you can tie into other GIS sources.
Awesome. Great. Well, I want to give one last plug for both of you is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up for this segment? Either one of you?
Yeah, I mean, other than our non-coherent change detection that we're doing on a regional basis, like I mentioned earlier, we're developing strongly towards broad area change monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, these larger picture monitoring scenarios. We've done some work looking at deforestation, trying to tie that into infrastructure changes in Brazil or in the Amazon area. It's part of just a growing suite of services and programs we're working on.
Yep, and this first example, I think, is just one step of a series of things that we can do as Fusion products or that we can develop out further. You mentioned before, like, how does this fit in? The activity index, this can be step one. Here is change. Let's investigate. Let's get some economic indicators. This can also be step one. Let's get higher res data. Step one, okay, let's go do some 3D change detection. This initial step really opens the doors for a lot more, advanced analysis that we can do that could provide key insights over these areas of interest.
Great. Well, once again, I want to thank both of you for coming on the show, talking about border tensions, the topic of border tensions, and exploring some more of what URSA's technology has to offer. As feasible, we'll include some of the links to some of the examples you've shown within the show notes. And appreciate you coming on. And for everybody in the audience, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.